Pull up your last patio photo from August. Not May, August. If the plants in that pot look tired, washed out, half collapsed, or completely gone, you are not alone, and you are not bad at gardening. You bought plants designed to sell well at a garden center in May. You asked them to perform on concrete, in afternoon sun, in a black plastic pot the size of a coffee can. They did exactly what they were built to do, which was look beautiful in spring and quit by midsummer. A hot patio is not a normal garden. The container heats up. The concrete radiates heat back into the pot. The soil volume is tiny, so it dries out by lunchtime. You water in the morning, you come home from work, and the leaves are already crispy along the edges. Then you spend the next 2 months either chasing the watering can or watching the pot die in slow motion. There is a better way, and it has very little to do with your watering schedule. It has to do with picking plants that were built for these exact conditions in the first place. This video is the short list. 13 perennials for hot patio containers that can handle heat with less frantic watering once they are established. Plant 11 is the one most people walk past at the garden center, and it ends up being the most touched plant on the patio by July. Before the list, 2 quick things, because the plants only work if the rest of the setup is right. First, a hot patio container is one of the harshest environments in your whole yard. Roots in the ground can chase moisture sideways and downward, and the surrounding soil acts like a buffer. Roots in a container have nowhere to go. On a sunny patio, soil inside a black plastic pot can climb well above the air temperature, especially when the pot is sitting on concrete or brick that has been baking all afternoon. The bigger the pot, the more buffer. The smaller and darker the pot, the more like an oven. Second, most plants sold for spring pots are annuals. Petunias, calibrachoa, impatiens, geraniums. They look great in May because they were grown in a controlled greenhouse and handed to you at peak bloom. They are not built for a hot patio in July, and they are certainly not built to come back next year. If you want a porch or patio that looks alive without rebuying everything every spring, you need perennials that evolved in conditions a lot like a hot patio. Mediterranean hillsides, alpine rock, Texas roadsides, prairie, southwestern desert. Plants from those backgrounds already know how to handle dry roots, full sun, lean soil, and missed watering. That is the entire list below. I will also slow down twice in the middle to cover pot size, soil mix, and how to water smart. Because the plant is only half of this. The container is the other half. Plant 1. Sedum. Start with the easiest. Sedum stores water inside its own leaves. That is the whole survival strategy in one sentence. The leaves are thick because they are full of stored moisture. When you forget to water for a week, the plant draws from that reservoir and keeps going. When you finally water, it refills. For a hot patio, a low-spreading sedum like Angelina gives you chartreuse foliage that shifts to coppery orange when nights cool off in fall. For a more upright look, Autumn Joy or Autumn Fire give you broccoli-shaped flower heads in late summer that look like they were placed by a designer. Hardy through USDA zones 3 to 9 for most popular cultivars. Full sun. Lean, fast-draining soil. The classic mistake is rich, peat-heavy potting mix and a steady watering routine. That makes sedum tall, floppy, and pale. Cut back on water, do not feed it, and the plant tightens up and colors better. One container caveat. In humid southern summers, give it morning sun and a little afternoon shade. The plant handles heat. It handles humidity less gracefully when the soil stays wet. Plant 2. Lavender Phenomenal. Lavender on a hot patio is one of the most rewarding pots you can build, and one of the easiest to get wrong. The plant evolved in Mediterranean soils that are dry, rocky, lean, alkaline, with hot sun and almost no organic richness. When we put it in a container of moisture-retentive potting mix, water it every other day, and tuck a saucer underneath, we recreate the only conditions on Earth that can kill it. For containers in U.S. heat, pick a lavender hybrid, not an English type. Phenomenal is the standard for hot, humid climates because it tolerates higher heat and the kind of summer humidity that takes out Hidcote and Munstead in the south. Grosso is the other reliable workhorse and has higher essential oil content if fragrance matters most. Zones 5 to 9 for Phenomenal, depending on the source. In the Gulf Coast and the lower south, even Phenomenal often behaves as a short-lived perennial. 2 to 3 years before it declines is normal. That is not failure. That is a realistic lifespan for any lavender in long, humid summers. The fix is in the pot. Mix about 1/3 coarse perlite or horticultural grit into your potting soil. Use a container with multiple drainage holes. Skip the saucer. Do not fertilize. Lean and dry is the goal. In Phoenix or Tucson conditions, light afternoon shade can extend its life. In the upper Midwest and Northeast, give the pot a sheltered overwintering spot, since container roots experience colder temperatures than the ground around them. Plant 3. Hens and Chicks. Sempervivum. There is exactly one perennial on this list that will thrive in a container so small, most plants would not survive it. Hens and Chicks. These are succulent rosettes that come from the rocky parts of the Alps, the Carpathians, and the Pyrenees. They evolved on stone, with no real soil, in places that freeze hard in winter and bake in summer. A 4-inch terracotta pot on a hot patio is not a hardship for this plant. It is closer to home than the average flower bed. A mature rosette, called the hen, sends out smaller rosettes around its base. Those are the chicks. Each one is genetically identical and ready to root. You can pinch a chick off, drop it in a small pot of cactus mix, and have a new plant in a week. One plant becomes 10, 10 becomes 50 over a few seasons. Hardy through zones 3 to 8 for most varieties. Full sun to bright morning sun. Gritty, fast-draining soil. Almost no fertilizer. Shallow pots work better than deep ones. Avoid sealed, decorative pots without drainage. The classic mistake is rich potting mix and a regular watering schedule, which softens the rosettes and rots the crown. The right amount of water is much less than you think. Every week or two during active growth, and let the soil dry out fully in between. In the deep south, give Sempervivum some afternoon shade. The plant handles heat. It handles heat plus high humidity less well. Plant 4. Russian Sage. Compact cultivars. Russian sage in a hot patio container is one of the most underrated combinations in American gardening. The plant gives you months of pale blue flowers on silver gray stems, asks for almost nothing once it is settled in, and looks better against concrete and brick than most things you can buy at the nursery. The botanical name has changed. Most extension sources now classify it as Salvia yangii rather than Perovskia. You will still see it sold under the old name everywhere. Same plant. For containers, pick a compact cultivar. Little spire tops out around 18 to 24 inches instead of the 4-foot floppy mess that standard Russian sage becomes in a pot. Denim and lace is another good compact option with darker blue flower color. Zones 4 to 9. Full sun, sharp drainage, lean soil, drought tolerant once established. The aromatic foliage means deer skip it, and there is almost no insect pressure. One container note: standard Russian sage spreads slowly by underground runners in the ground. In a pot, the roots stay contained, so this is not an issue. But if you ever transplant it into the ground, give it room and check your state extension if you garden near natural areas. The single maintenance task: in late February or early March, cut the dead stems back to about 6 inches. That is the entire annual care list. The plant returns fuller every season, and the silver winter stems give you visual structure, even in months when nothing else in the container is doing anything. The pot is half the plant. Pause for a minute on the container itself, because the wrong pot kills the right plant more often than people realize. 3 things matter on a hot patio. Size. Container soil volume buffers everything: temperature, moisture, root health. A perennial in a 10-inch pot needs watering every 1 to 2 days in summer heat. The same plant in a 16-inch pot stretches that to every 3 or 4 days. In a 24-inch container, you may go a week or longer in mild weather. For every plant on this list, 16 inches across is the minimum if you want to use the words low maintenance honestly. Color and material. A black plastic pot in afternoon sun on a concrete patio can hit soil temperatures well above the air temperature. Terracotta breathes but dries out fast. Glazed ceramic stays cooler and retains moisture longer. Light-colored pots reflect heat. If the patio is brutal, light-colored, larger, glazed pots are the most forgiving. Drainage. Multiple holes, not one. Skip the decorative cache pose that seal at the bottom, unless you can lift the inner pot out to drain. A saucer under a drought-tolerant perennial is almost guaranteed root trouble waiting to happen. There is a 4th thing for cold zones, which is winter. Container roots experience temperatures more extreme than the surrounding air. A perennial hardy to zone 5 in the ground is often hardy only to zone 7 in a pot. We come back to winter later in the video. Plant 5, Agastache, hummingbird mint. Agastache, often called hummingbird mint or anise hyssop, is one of the best hot patio container plants most American gardeners have never tried. It blooms from midsummer through fall on tall vertical spikes, and hummingbirds find it almost immediately. Many species come from arid parts of the southwestern U.S. and northern Mexico, plus prairie zones across the country. That background gives the plant a deep taproot, a lean soil preference, and very real drought tolerance once established. The leaves smell like licorice or mint when you brush them. That aromatic oil is also what makes deer and rabbits skip it. For a reliable container cultivar, Blue Fortune is the standard. Compact, upright, blue-purple flower spikes, hardy in zones 5 to 9. The Kudos series, including Kudos Coral and Kudos Gold, was specifically bred for tighter habit and stronger garden performance, which is what you want in a pot. Full sun. Lean, well-drained potting mix. Skip the fertilizer. Rich soil produces more leaves than flowers and weakens the stems. Water during the first season to establish, then back off. The container caveat: Agastache really dislikes wet feet in winter. In zones 5 and 6, where freeze-thaw cycles are common, the plant is more likely to die from soggy soil sitting around dormant roots than from cold itself. A pot with sharp drainage and a sheltered overwintering spot solves most of that. Plant 6, coneflower, compact cultivars. Coneflower, Echinacea purpurea and its hybrids, is a prairie native, which is exactly the resume you want for a hot patio. The plant grew up in conditions where summer rain came in bursts, drainage was sharp, and surviving long, dry stretches was the basic job description. For a container, pick a compact cultivar. Standard purple coneflower can hit 4 feet tall and topple over in a pot. Powwow wildberry is shorter, fuller, more compact, and was specifically bred for landscape and container performance. It blooms heavily from early summer through fall, in magenta pink with a dark cone center. Powwow white is the same plant in white. Zones 3 to 9, full sun, drought tolerant once the first season is behind it. Deer tend to leave it alone. The pollinator value is real. Bees and butterflies work the flowers in summer. If you leave the seed heads standing into fall and winter, goldfinches and other small birds feed on the seeds, which gives the container some genuine wildlife activity for months after the show ends. One honest caveat: coneflower in a small pot needs more watering attention than coneflower in the ground. The taproot makes it drought tolerant when it can dig in, but a container limits how far the roots can go. Use at least a 16-inch pot, and do not let the soil bake bone dry repeatedly in the first season. If this kind of clear, plant-by-plant advice is what you wish someone had walked you through before your last container shopping spree, subscribe. The goal here is simple: fewer plants that fail, fewer wasted spring purchases, and more pots that still look alive in July. Plant 7. Salvia nemorosa, May night. Salvia nemorosa, the woodland sage, gives you spikes of deep blue-purple flowers from late spring through early summer, in conditions a lot of softer plants cannot handle. The cultivar May night, sometimes labeled Maynacht, was a Perennial Plant Association Plant of the Year, and it earned the title by being almost embarrassingly reliable. For hot patio containers, the appeal is straightforward. The plant comes from European meadows and dry slopes. It tolerates lean soil, full sun, and mist watering once established. The aromatic foliage is unappetizing to deer. Pollinators, especially bees, work the flower spikes constantly. Zones 4 to 8. Full sun, well-drained soil. About 18 to 24 inches tall in a container. The maintenance trick that doubles your bloom. When the first flush of flowers fades in early summer, cut the entire plant back by about 1/3. It looks rough for about 2 weeks, then pushes a second flush of flowers in late summer. Most container gardeners skip this trim and assume the plant is finished by July. It is not. It is waiting for the cut. A note on naming. You will see Salvia sylvestris May night and Salvia nemorosa May night used interchangeably at garden centers. Same plant in practice. Pick the one with the strongest stems and tightest habit in the pot at the nursery. That variation matters more than the label. Plant 8. Blue Fescue. Festuca glauca, Elijah blue. Every container arrangement is stronger with one ornamental grass for texture. And on a hot patio, you want one that stays compact and does not flop. Blue Fescue Elijah Blue is the most reliable small option I know. The plant forms a tight, dome-shaped clump of silvery blue, needle-fine foliage, about 8 to 12 inches tall and wide. Slender, tan flower spikes rise above the foliage in summer. The blue color holds through most of the season and pairs with almost any flower color you put next to it. Zones 4 to 8. Full sun. Well-drained, lean soil. Drought tolerant once established. Deer resistant. not toxic to pets. The honest caveat for the Deep South and the Gulf Coast. Blue fescue is a cool season grass at heart. It tolerates heat, but it does not love hot plus humid. In zones 8B and warmer, especially in the southeast, the center of the clump can brown out in midsummer. The fix is good airflow, lean soil, and a haircut in late winter to refresh the foliage. In Texas, Florida, and the Gulf, treat it as a beautiful but possibly shorter-lived plant, 2 or 3 good years rather than 10. In zones 4 through 7, it is one of the toughest small grasses you can grow in a container, and it will hold its shape through winter while everything else looks empty. Soil and drainage, the second container trap. Most bagged potting soil sold in big box stores is designed for moisture-loving annuals, petunias, impatiens, calibrachoa. It holds water. That is the opposite of what every plant on this list wants. For hot patio perennials, mix your own. Start with roughly half quality potting mix, about 1/3 coarse perlite or pumice for drainage, and a smaller amount of compost for slow nutrition. The exact recipe can shift by climate. In humid areas, push the drainage higher. In the dry southwest, keep a little more moisture-holding potting mix. If you garden in a humid climate, push the perlite higher. If you garden in the dry southwest, you can keep more potting mix. The principle is the same. Water should pour through the pot within 15 to 30 seconds of pouring. If it sits and pools, the mix is too dense. Skip the synthetic fertilizer for most of these plants. Lavender, Sedum, Hens and Chicks, Agastache, Russian Sage, Blue Fescue, and the others on this list actually do better in lean soil. Rich soil and frequent fertilizer push soft, floppy growth and weak flowering. Once a year in spring, scrape off the top 1 or 2 inches of soil and replace it with fresh compost. That is the entire annual feeding. One last thing. Do not reuse old potting mix without refreshing it. Pot mix breaks down over a season, compacts, loses drainage, and can carry over pests and disease. Refresh the top of the container every spring and replace the whole pot of soil every 2 or 3 years. Plant 9. Artemisia Powis Castle. If lamb's ear is the famous silverleaf plant for borders, Artemisia Powis Castle is the version built for hot containers. The foliage is finely cut, silvery white, almost feathery, and it stays attractive from spring through hard frost. The whole reason it works on a hot patio is the silver coat. Those leaves are covered in fine hairs that reflect sunlight and trap a thin layer of air against the leaf surface. That reduces leaf temperature and slows water loss. The plant evolved for hot, dry hillsides. Concrete and brick patios are familiar territory. Powis Castle is a hybrid that almost never flowers, which means all the plant's energy goes into producing that silver foliage. That is exactly what you want as a container anchor, or as the cool element among more colorful flowering plants. Zones 6 to 9, sometimes pushing into zone 5 in the right microclimate. Full sun, sharp drainage, lean soil. About 2 to 3 feet tall in a container, sometimes a bit shorter. The trim. In early spring, cut it back by about 1/3 to 1/2 to keep the habit dense. Without that haircut, the plant gets woody and open at the base. With the trim, it stays full and rounded all season. One caveat: Powis Castle is sterile and well-behaved, but some other artemisias, especially Artemisia ludoviciana, can spread aggressively. Pick the right one. Powis Castle is a hybrid, and the label should say so. Plant 10. Gaura, Oenothera lindhameri. Gaura, recently reclassified as Oenothera lindhameri, is a Texas and Louisiana native. And that origin tells you almost everything you need to know. The plant evolved on hot prairie soils with bursts of rain and long, dry stretches. On a hot patio container, it acts like it never left home. The bloom is the selling point. Small white or soft pink 4-petal flowers float on thin, wiry stems, opening just a few at a time over a long stretch from early summer well into fall. The whole effect looks like butterflies hovering above the foliage, which is where the common name, quote, one comes from. Whirling butterflies is the classic white-flowered cultivar with reddish stems. Belleza dark pink is a more compact, deeper pink option that holds its shape better in a container. Fescue pink is another reliable pink cultivar. Zones 5 to 9, depending on cultivar. Full sun. Lean, well-drained soil. The taproot is what gives this plant its drought tolerance once it is established. One important container caveat: Gaura really does not like being moved once it settles in. The taproot resents disturbance. Plant it once, in the pot where you want it, for a few years, and leave it alone. Light fertilizer at most, because rich soil produces lush foliage and weak stems. In humid southern summers, give it good airflow to reduce powdery mildew pressure on the foliage. Plant 11, Dianthus firewitch. This is the plant I mentioned in the opening, the one most people walk past at the garden center and end up being the most touched plant on the patio by July. Dianthus firewitch, also sold as Foyahex, is a compact carnation relative with blue-gray grassy foliage and bright magenta-pink fragrant flowers from late spring through summer. The fragrance is the surprise. Most people lean in to look at the color, smell the spice clove scent, and come back 5 minutes later to smell it again. It is one of the most underrated fragrant plants you can grow in a pot. The plant evolved on rocky alpine slopes. That background gives it strong sun tolerance, real drought tolerance once established, and a dislike of soggy soil. On a hot patio, it is right at home. Zones 3 to 9 for firewitch, full sun. Lean, well-drained, slightly alkaline soil. About 4 to 8 inches tall, spreading to a foot or so wide. The trick is shearing. After the first big flush of flowers, shear the spent blooms back lightly with hand pruners or even kitchen scissors. The plant pushes a second flush a few weeks later. Without the shearing, it slows down for the rest of summer. Place this one near a doorway, near a chair, or at the edge of a patio table. Anywhere people will brush past it. The fragrance is wasted if the plant is hidden in the back of an arrangement. Plant 12, Pine Leaf Penstemon, Penstemon pinifolius. Most penstemons sold in American garden centers are bred for cottage borders and need more water than a hot patio container will give them. There is one major exception, and it is one of the best hot patio plants almost nobody buys. Pine leaf penstemon, Penstemon pinifolius. The plant is a small evergreen subshrub, native to the dry mountains of New Mexico and Arizona. The foliage looks like fine pine needles, narrow, dark green, dense. In late spring and early summer, it produces clusters of tubular orange-red flowers that hummingbirds find almost immediately. There is also a yellow-flowered selection called Mercy Yellow that gives a softer color option. Zones 4 to 9, full sun. Lean, Very well-drained soil. About 12 to 15 inches tall and wide. The plant looks ornamental even out of bloom because the needle-like foliage gives it year-round texture. The container caveat that matters most. This plant rots in heavy, wet soil. Mix extra pumice or coarse grit into the potting mix and resist the urge to water on a schedule. The first season needs regular watering to establish. After that, less water, not more. For Southwest gardeners, it is one of the easiest perennials you can grow on a hot patio. For Southeast gardeners with high summer humidity, treat it as possibly shorter-lived and emphasize drainage above everything else. Watering smart in hot weather. 3 rules cover almost everything. 1. Water deeply, then leave the pot alone until the soil is meaningfully dry. Shallow daily watering trains roots to stay at the surface, where they cook. Deep watering once or twice a week, depending on weather and pot size, drives roots down into the pot where they have more thermal protection. 2. Check before you water. Do not water on autopilot. Stick a finger or a wooden chopstick into the soil 2 inches down. If it comes out dry, water. If it comes out moist, wait. For drought-tolerant perennials, soggy soil is far more dangerous than dry soil. 3. Water in the early morning when possible. Morning watering gives the plant moisture before the day's heat builds and the foliage dries off before evening, which reduces fungal problems. Avoid overhead watering on lavender, salvia, and Mediterranean foliage in particular. Wet leaves plus heat plus humidity is a recipe for leaf disease. One bonus thought for winter. Containers freeze faster than the ground. A perennial hardy to zone 5 in the open garden is often only reliably hardy to zone 7 in a pot. In cold zones, group your hot patio pots together against a south or east-facing wall for winter. Mulch the soil surface and water only sparingly if the mix gets completely dry and the pot is not frozen. That alone keeps most of these plants alive through their first hard winter. Plant 13, Catmint, cat's pajamas. The final plant is one most people first met as a sprawling, floppy mess in a cottage border and assume it cannot be a container plant. Newer cultivars change that. Catmint, Nepeta, has been used in gardens for centuries because it blooms for months, attracts pollinators, smells aromatic in a way that deer dislike, and survives almost anything once it is established. The classic walker's low is a great in-ground plant, but at 2 to 3 feet tall and wide, it tends to flop in a pot. Cat's Pajamas was bred specifically to solve that problem. Compact, upright, tight at the base, dense flower spikes packed with deep purple-blue blooms from late spring straight through fall. Cat's Meow is the slightly larger sister cultivar. Both were bred for container and small space performance, and they hold their shape on a hot patio without staking. Zones 3 to 8, full sun. Average to lean soil. Drought tolerant once established. Deer resistant. The trick is the same trim as Salvia. After the first heavy flush of flowers fades in early summer, shear the whole plant back by about 1/3. Looks rough for 10 days, then comes back with a second wave of flowers that runs into fall. This plant is also where catmint earns its name. The foliage contains compounds that attract some cats. If you have an outdoor cat that flattens plants by rolling on them, place this where the cat cannot reach it. The foliage is not meaningfully toxic to cats or dogs, but it will attract attention. Before you walk into a garden center this weekend, 3 quick checks that decide whether any plant on this list actually works for your patio. First check: how much sun does the pot actually get, and at what time of day? Morning sun for 6 hours is gentle. Afternoon sun on concrete from 1 to 6 is brutal. Most plants on this list want sun, but for hens and chicks, blue fescue, and some lavenders, brutal afternoon sun in zones 8 and warmer is too much. A small shift in pot placement matters more than the cultivar. Second check: your USDA zone, but also your summer climate. Zones do not tell you about humidity. A plant rated for Zone 7 may thrive in Zone 7 Pennsylvania and struggle in Zone 7 Coastal Carolina because of summer humidity. If you garden in the Southeast or the Gulf Coast, lean toward the heat and humidity-tolerant cultivars in this video. Phenomenal lavender, Powis Castle Artemisia, Gaura, Dianthus. And treat blue fescue and English-type lavenders as shorter-lived experiments. Third check: the pot itself. 16 inches across as a minimum, multiple drainage holes, light-colored or glazed if your patio is brutal, and a mix that drains in under 30 seconds. If the pot is wrong, the plant choice barely matters. Pick one pot to start, not the whole patio. The one container that has frustrated you most often. Match it to one plant from this video that fits your sun, your zone, and your climate. Get that one right before you change everything else. That is how a hot patio stops being a graveyard for spring annuals and starts being something that still looks alive when August arrives. If you want more of this kind of plant advice for real American patios with the cultivars that actually survive your climate, subscribe before you click away. In the comments, tell me your zone and what is sitting on your hottest patio spot right now. Black plastic pot on concrete, glazed ceramic on brick, a small window box that bakes in afternoon sun. The combination of pot, surface, and exposure matters more than any plant tag suggests, and I read the comments to build the next videos.